We reserve the right to take action when our national security is directly threatened.
Where does your loyalty lie? Is it with Queen and country, or is it with the Muslims overboard?
Going to fight for a terrorist organisation is a criminal act. It's a one-way ticket. If you go, you can't simply change your mind and come back.
We're here outside the Foreign Office in London, and we're about to speak to the British Foreign Secretary, Philip Hammond, about the UK's contribution to the coalition and how the fight against the Islamic State is progressing. Hi, Foreign Secretary. How's it going? How are you? And you? Recently, the Islamic State has been able to seize Palmyra in Syria and Ramadi in Iraq. Clearly, Islamic State is able to expand still. It almost looks as if you're standing by as the map of the Middle East is being redrawn. Is it time to maybe rethink the strategy that the coalition is currently implementing?
I reject the idea that ISIL is expanding. Ramadi has been fought over for the last 12 months. ISIL were in the city already, but in terms of territory gained, it's a very small additional amount of territory, and it's not strategically important. Much more significant is the fall of Tikrit to Iraqi government forces earlier on this year. Strategically, ISIL's advance has been stopped, that is clear.
Recently, Sir Richard Dannett, former head of the Armed Forces, called for a review on the government's position on boots on the ground policy. Do you think it's an option we should really actually now consider if we want to deal with ISIS in a fast manner?
If we were in a situation where the Iraqi government was pleading with us to put Western boots on the ground and we were refusing, then he would have a point. The Iraqis are very clear, and I think rightly so, that this fight cannot be won by outsiders. They don't want Western troops, boots on the ground.
Should there be an increase in airstrikes? There was a lot of complaints in Ramadi that there weren't enough around the time.
Well, we have the capability to mount as many airstrikes as we have targets. The constraint, as I understand it at the moment, is identifying enough targets where we can be absolutely confident that there will not be collateral damage or civilian casualties. The Ramadi thing, ISIL are not stupid. They launched their ferocious attack on the government compound in Ramadi at a time when the weather did not allow coalition aircraft to fly.
This is literally the very front line in the global fight against the Islamic State.
Increasingly, we've seen on the ground the face of that Iraqi fight back is those of Iranian-backed Shia militias. Are you concerned about Iran's growing influence?
We need to be careful that that influence doesn't destabilise Iraq. I think it's important to be careful about describing all Shia militias as Iranian-controlled. Some of them are, but some of them aren't.
The most powerful are.
And there's a strand of Iraqi Shia nationalism which I think we should respect. The challenge for the government of Iraq is that the bulk of the capable military forces in Iraq at the moment are either Kurdish or Shia militias. If there's one thing that I could wish for in Iraq at the moment, it would be the emergence of an effective, well-armed, well-disciplined, well-motivated Sunni fighting force.
You mentioned the Kurdish Peshmerga. We filmed with them earlier this year. Obviously they're getting support from many nations, but they did complain about the lack of British support in comparison to, say, the Germans who've provided 16,000 assault rifles. We've given them 40 machine guns. Why is there this sort of discrepancy in material support to the forces like the Peshmerga?
Well, look, my experience is that if you put a journalist into any area like Erbil and challenge him, he'll be able to find somebody who will complain about anybody's contribution. Different people will contribute in different ways. Albania has donated vast amounts of ammunition, which the Peshmerga needs. The RAF has flown that ammunition in to Erbil. The speciality support that we're delivering is counter-IED, an area where Britain has particular expertise. It is IEDs that are posing the greatest threat to the government and Peshmerga forces on the ground at the moment. So we are delivering strong support to the Peshmerga, and we continually review what we're offering and what we're doing.
And in terms of Syria, you recently have talked about the Assad regime's use of barrel bombs in Aleppo. On Saturday, at least 70 people were reported to have been killed from government barrel bombings. Obviously, the coalition strikes ISIS. Why has there been sort of still a real lack of proper action against the Assad regime?
The Assad regime's capabilities are being degraded, but unfortunately, the moderate armed opposition that we have backed is not making the progress that we need it to make. More extreme groups are often in the lead when success is scored against the regime. We're the second largest deliverer of airstrikes in Iraq. The Americans and the Arab partners are delivering airstrikes in Syria. At the moment, there is no need for us to spread our effort more widely across the two theatres. The arrangement we've got in place works perfectly well.
There was an argument to say that there is a need for an increase in the Islamic State. Recently took Palmyra and now controls up to 50% of the country. Surely that should sort of...
Yeah, but the problem is that airstrike cannot resolve all of these challenges. And Palmyra is a good example because of the presence of civilians, because of the way ISIL operates, because of the risk to cultural heritage. There would have been a really significant limit to what could be done through airstrike.
ان شاء الله بدنا نحرر اللاذقيه باذن الله وجايين على الساحل يعني مش ما يفكر النظام يعني اني راح يرتاح او يفكر اني بدي اسوي مشروع الدوله العلويه باذن الله بدنا ندير وياه كلياتنا.
You've mentioned a moderate opposition. A lot of those sort of older moderate groups have now been swallowed by this new coalition, Jaish al-Fatah, the Army of Conquest. There's now a chance that they could turn their attention towards the sort of Alawite enclave of Latakia. Is that something that the coalition is willing to stand by and let happen?
The problem here is that the Assad regime is effectively protected and supported by Russia and by Iran. If we're going to make political progress, we have to have some kind of understanding with Russia and Iran about how we can see emerging in place of Assad a regime which is able to take on ISIL and the more extreme Islamist groups ranged against it.
Has there been discussions about possibly targeting the Islamic State in places like Libya?
So long as there is a standoff between the two opposing claimants on power in Libya, it's difficult for the outside world to intervene. Our position at the moment is to focus on building that national unity government.
But if that threat became apparent, would you look beyond sort of the request from a unity government and just sort of take action?
Well, of course, we reserve the right, as do all sovereign nations, to take action unilaterally or with partners when our national security is directly threatened or the lives of our citizens are put at risk.
The Islamic State as an ideal has been very popular worldwide and arguably here in the UK. What is being done by the current government to sort of check that influence?
It's important that we expose to people who might be vulnerable to recruitment the gap between the glamorized image presented in the glossy messaging and the brutal reality on the ground, which so many British recruits have discovered to their cost once they've got there.
We believe martyrs are not dead, they're still alive, enjoying themselves in heaven.
There's a worry, I think, that some of the more punitive measures of people returning from that could send the wrong signal.
I mean, we have to be clear that going to fight for a terrorist organisation anywhere in the world is a criminal act. And if you are a British citizen and you carry out that kind of activity, you must expect to be brought to justice and to be punished for it. It's a one-way ticket. If you go, you can't simply change your mind and come back.
And Britain will be next. And Britain will be, inshallah, will be in the world of Islamic world, inshallah ta'ala, bi'idhnillah.
Last government, there's a lot of defence spending cuts. There's also been cuts to, obviously, your office here now, and our contributions in comparison to our American partners in the coalition are a lot less. Is there a danger that the UK is withdrawing as a real power?
No, and we're going to have a debate in the Queen's speech on Britain's role in the world, and I shall be making clear that Britain intends to remain engaged, outward-looking, and an active player on the global scene. And we're one of really a very small number of countries around the world that have both the capability and the aspiration to be engaged in global policy.